Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, where we discuss everything in the world of Major League Baseball. As always, I'm your host, Jeremiah.
My name is Ben.
And we're back again. And this is we're here for our second division preview show. We did the National League Central last week, that involves, the defending World Series champion Chicago Cubs, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now we're going to preview the division, that features the team that the Cubs played last year in the World Series that was really one game away from finishing the deal. They were up 3-1, and they blew that lead. We're talking about the American League Central here. And it has the Cleveland Indians, and, man, they look like they're poised to make another World Series run. Like, they are still stacked. We're also going to talk about the Detroit Tigers, the Kansas City Royals, the Chicago White Sox, and the Minnesota Twins. So we're going to try to do pretty much a team-by-team breakdown as best as we can. But, Ben, we have to start with the Cleveland Indians because they're hands down the best team in this division. Best team in this division.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, the Indians, obviously the runners-up in the World Series. As you mentioned, Jeremiah represented the American League, finished 94-67, a run differential of 101, and they're bringing back pretty much everybody with the exception of maybe Mike Napoli from this roster of last year. Get the addition of Michael Brantley back from injury. That'll really help Denny Salazar in the pitching rotation as well. He missed some time at the end of the season there. So I think it'll really be another solid season for the Tribe.
Yeah, what's scary is that this team literally almost won the World Series without Carlos Carrasco, Danny Salazar, and Michael Brantley. Michael Brantley hasn't played a full season in 2 years. So this team is even better. And don't forget, they signed Edwin Encarnacion as well. And I do think they got a potential MVP candidate there. I think I'm going to say Francisco Lindor is an MVP candidate, Ben. I think he's going to have that type of season. They got Carlos Santana. They got Jason Kipnis coming back. If you look at this lineup from top to bottom, they got Carlos Santana, Jason Kipnis, Francisco Lindor, Edwin Encarnacion. Those top four guys. That's a good top four to have in your lineup. It doesn't get any better than that. And then they got Michael Brantley, Tyler Naquin, who looks like he can be a potential breakout candidate coming into the big leagues last year. And then they got Lonnie Sisenhall and Yan Gomes. And we can't forget about Jose Ramirez. He had a pretty productive season, playing for the Tribe there. So the strength of this team, though, I think we can both agree on this, is this pitching rotation. I do think it's one of the best in baseball. It's not just the best in the American League. I think it's probably one of the best in baseball.
Definitely, they have the ace with Corey Kluber. He was another Cy Young candidate last year, and we saw his success in the postseason, pitching on 3 days rest multiple times, game in and game out, and he continued to play well, except for that one start in the World Series. I think it was Game 5, where he kind of got lit up a little bit there. Maybe was a little tired, but you see success with Cleveland, and it was a pitching rotation that got it done for them last year, even during the middle of the season, and really propelled them in the playoffs. Then you had the breakout performances of Lindor, as you mentioned, in really the World Series and the ALCS particularly. So you add Encarnacion, who's either going to hit a home run or strike out, so he can maybe provide more, I'll say, pop in his bat. The Napoli is going to play pretty much a similar position. So it looks like on paper that Cleveland are primed for another deep run, as I mentioned. I think they really ought to do just as good as they did last year. Really, the only thing that's going to set them back, in my eyes, is injuries. Although we'll preview the rest of this division here in the second half of this segment and next segment. But I think they'll face some good competition this year. I feel like there will be some teams that will have some bounce back seasons in the division.
Yeah, and I do think when I looked at this division from top to bottom, this is hands down the most talented team. I think they can possibly run away with this division. They can get 90-plus wins again. But, comparing this team comparing to the elite in the American League, this is a team I think that's more worried about making the playoffs. Because I do think they know the type of team they have. I do think they have the best team in that division. And I'm not saying that, they're not thinking about the other competition, that division at all. I'm just saying this team has World Series aspirations again. I do think they can potentially make it again. Do you think this team, Ben, can make the World Series again? I do think they have that type of potential.
Of course they can. Exactly. They have the building and winning recipe to get it done. A great manager in Terry Francona who knows what it takes to get it done as well. They're going to face some good competition. I feel like Boston's better. Baltimore and the Blue Jays are good. The Yankees are pretty good. And we'll talk about the rest of this division as we talk about each team. But I feel like Detroit's going to have a really good season, great lineup, and Kansas City will have a bounce back year after they were in the World Series 2 of the last 3 years now. So, like I said, the one thing that's going to have them kind of questioning me a little bit is injuries. Brantley, you mentioned, hasn't played a full season in 2 years. You had Salazar, who missed time. Carrasco missed time. Josh Tomlin missed some time in the postseason as well. And if they can just sort of mesh and really evolve into the team we saw in the postseason last year, because they were kind of the dark horse. I mean, everyone thought Boston would beat them in the divisional round, and they swept them. Everyone thought Toronto would give them some fits, and then they handled them really easily, only won in 5 games. So everyone kind of surprised last year with the Indians, and now they have a lot of expectations on their shoulders, and they're the team that's expected to play well.
I think they're going to be back in the World Series. I truly do. And I know the Red Sox got better, and I know teams in the American League East got better, but this team, I think they got better by the guys that they got back from injuries. And they did upgrade at the designated hitter position with Edwin Encarnacion, and Mike Napoli had probably the best year of his career last season with the Indians, but Edwin Encarnacion has been one of the top power hitters in baseball. And this is how injuries have plagued their season last year. They started Trevor Bauer in the playoffs literally like 2 days after injuring his hand fixing a drone. That's how bad luck they had last season with injuries. And you know what? They literally got through it. They're one of the teams that literally grinded it out with what they had, and they came 1 win away. That should tell you how good this team can be again. So, pretty much, when I look at the Indians, it's pretty much like a what-if game. What if they had a fully healthy team? What if Michael Brantley plays at a high level again? Which I don't think he really has to. He's not really the top hitter in this team anymore. What if Carlos Carrasco was fully healthy? What if Danny Salazar was fully healthy? I don't know. I personally think if this team had a fully healthy staff, I don't think they would have blew that 3-1 lead. I don't think they would. I truly think they would have closed the deal early.
I mean, it's always tough, especially when you were playing the team like you did last year with the Cubs. It's such a good team, the most wins in the regular season with 103. And I think some of that pressure just kind of got to them a little bit. It's tough to always close out an opponent who's so hungry and are playing so good as Chicago was. And they kind of just turned it around those last 3 games. They had their chances, Game 7 at home, go to extra innings, but they just fell a little short.
Yeah, they did. But, before we take our first break here and to preview the rest of the division here, I did say that Francisco Lindor is an MVP candidate. I do think he's going to be an MVP candidate. I do think he's about to take that next level. He had a lot of national spotlight last season in the World Series and the playoffs. I think Michael Brantley, I think he's poised for a bounce-back year. I don't think he's going to have that 20 home run season and that 90 RBI plus season like he did, 2 years ago. Because he doesn't have to be that guy anymore. I can see Tyler Naquin being a possible breakout candidate. He does need to take some grooming in, but I think this team will have. I think this rotation is good enough to have 3 Cy Young candidates. I do think so.
Kluber's obviously the dark horse one there that is going to show up and perform consistently, but it's all about how Carrasco and Salazar perform. They both missed some time last year, didn't pitch as many innings as some of the other guys, and that's really what determines everything. So It's possible. They have a really good rotation. I think that's definitely the strength. Opportunistic hitting, especially with Encarnacion, because he provides an element with the long ball now that they haven't really had the last few years. So it'll be interesting to see how Cleveland do. A lot of expectations this year.
Yeah, so this team is built to win the World Series, and I do think they will be back again. All right, well, we're going to take our first break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, and when we come back, we're going to discuss the rest of the teams in the American League Central when we get back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, and we are here discussing the American League Central Division. We're doing a division. We're going to preview each division until the start of the season, and we literally talked about the Indians for a whole entire segment. Now we're going to talk about the rest of the teams here. So, the Detroit Tigers, they were fighting for a wild card spot the second half of the year, and they literally fell off late at the last week of the season, or the last 2 weeks of the season, I might add. They finished second place with 86 wins. And this team has a lot of talent. I just felt like this team hasn't been utilized the way it could be. Justin Verlander had a great bounce back year, and, he did battle injuries. But this team, I think they have enough talent to make a wild card run, because I don't think they're as talented as the Indians to win this division. But I do think they can compete for a wild card spot, but I don't think they can, because the rest of the American League, especially the East Division, is just so much more talented than this Detroit Tigers team.
I mean, it's possible. Whenever you have a player like Miguel Cabrera, who can literally change the game with the single swing of a bat, it's tough. I mean, Victor Martinez had a good season as well. Justin Upton's capable of hitting 30 home runs. JD Martinez is a really good young player. Ian Kinsler's a good infielder and a good leadoff man. You have Verlander. You have the reigning American League Rookie of the Year and Michael the Plumber Fulmer. So they have some pieces there. I like Detroit. They've always been really good, really consistent, and just an offensive juggernaut.
Yeah, and I do think this team's talented. We can't write them off. I just think that the Indians are the team that are just much more superior than them. But if any team's going to compete for a division title, it's going to be the Detroit Tigers. And this team, they were shopping JD Martinez last year, and, he's still with the Tigers. And, they had a good breakout season from Nick Castellanos there from third base. But looking forward at this team, I do like this pitching rotation. I do think that is this. You can possibly make an argument that their lineup is the strength. I have to go with the rotation. Justin Verlander, great bounce back year. Jordan Zimmerman, really, I think he can be really good. He kind of was up and down last season. Michael Fulmer was a Rookie of the Year candidate, and I do think he can be even better. Anibal Sanchez hasn't been the same in like 4 years. But Daniel Norris, I do think he can potentially be a breakout player as well. This is a guy that they had in a trade from Toronto. But looking at this team, they're going to have a lot of competition in the American League. And I do think if this team is not in contention for any playoff spot in July before the deadline, I think they can be shoppers. No, not shoppers. I do think they can be sellers. I think they really can. Because, there's a possibility of them trading J.D. Martinez, my long-lost cousin. We can... Justin Upton can probably be a trade piece. Maybe Ian Kinsler. But I do think if this team is not in contention for a playoff spot, I think they will be sellers. Because they can probably get a draft. They can get a lot for those guys there.
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of potential there with Martinez, a guy that's been out there for a while, so possibly the market might be a little lower because teams may have offered something before. So it's a question of whether Detroit wants to maybe just cut their losses. I think it depends on the success or the success they're not having this season. As you mentioned, that'll be a big determining factor in my eyes as far as where they go this season at the trade deadline and just really progressing forward this season.
Yeah, so I do think that this team will finish second in the division again. But, honestly, if this team plays to their full potential, like I think they could be, I think they could contend for a wild card spot. I don't know if this pitching rotation is good enough to compete for a division title, though. I just don't think so. I just think, the Indians just have a far more superior rotation than the Tigers do. So I do think they can be a potential playoff team, but I do think it'll be in the wild card. And it just depends on how the other teams in the American League do because, we have talked about the American League East and how stacked they were, and they're even more stacked this year. So I do think it depends on if they play to their full potential and the success of the other teams and, on how they're doing compared to those teams in July. All right. Well, we're talking about the American League Central here, and Kansas City Royals. They kind of fell off the second half of the season. They started out really slow, and then they made a really good run in around June and July. We can't really forget about that. They were contending for a wild card spot as well, but late in the season, this team really fell off, and they have a lot of impending free agents here. And most of the guys that are free agents in 2018 are guys that have been a core piece for the two World Series runs. They did get one championship, but you got Eric Hosmer, Lorenzo Cain, Mike Moustakas, and Alcides Escobar. They're all in their contract years. And this is a very important year for Kansas City. And I do think if Kansas City is literally under 500 and by the trade deadline, I do think they can potentially trade for... I do think they can be sellers as well. So when I look at this team, I don't think they are as talented as the Tigers or the Indians. But this is a very important season for their free agents. Very important season, all in the walk year.
It's going to be tough. I mean, I don't really have much of a problem with their lineup. For me, it's mainly the rotation, and I realize a lot of that has to do with Yordano Ventura's unfortunate death this offseason in the Dominican Republic, which is unfortunate. But I mean, you're looking at opening starters being like Danny Duffy, maybe even Jason Hamill, who had a great season last year with Chicago, but I don't really see him repeating the success he had. So I like their lineup. Lorenzo Cain's a great player, and we mentioned some of the others, Mike Moustakas, Eric Hosmer, Alex Gordon even. But the problem is their pitching, and I think that's what kind of let them down last year. The Royals really just kind of collapsed last year on the road. They simply just could not win a game on the road. They were 47-34 at home, which is not bad, but then they were 34-47 on the road, which is definitely something you have to be able to do in baseball to really succeed, and that's what let them down last year. And I feel like that kind of affects the pitching rotation. It's always easier to pitch in front of your home fans and your home ballpark. So they're going to have to really find a way to get some pitching this season for me if they want to get back to where they've been the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's going to be a tough road to get back to where they were. a couple years ago. But like I said earlier, if this team is not contending at all for a playoff spot, I can see them selling Eric Hosmer, Lorenzo Cain, Mike Moustakas, and Alcides Escobar. I do think they can potentially sell those guys, and I do like the rotation. Not the rotation. I do like their lineup. Their lineup is they have really good, solid players there, really solid batters. But yeah, their opening day starter is probably going to be Danny Duffy, and I know he did great last season, but when your opening day starter is Danny Duffy, that's not really inspiring to me. They got Ian Kennedy, who has been really consistent throughout his whole career. Jason Hamill, who had a pretty good year with the Cubs, but he was the worst starter out of all of them. There's really not a whole lot to be inspired about this team, except for their lineup, and I do think that they're going to be potential sellers at the trade deadline because they got so many guys they can get a lot for that are in their final year of their contract.
Yeah, I think it all determines, because you have that final year, whether the team thinks they can sign these guys to extensions or not. You're going to want to get something for him while you can. So I do think this lineup will be a lot different come August and September than we're looking at in April, because I think it really depends on how well the team is doing. I think the Royals will have a little bit of a bounce-back season. I really expect them to. They went 81-81 last year, right at 500. I think they can easily do that same thing again, maybe win 5 or 6 more games to give them a shot at the wild card.
Yeah, and I do think it just all depends on how this team is playing in the summer. So, it'd be interesting. I think these are one of the teams to look out for throughout the entire year when trade deadline comes about. And moving on to the team that finished second to last place is the Chicago White Sox. And I'll tell you, the Chicago White Sox, I think, probably had the best offseason of any team. They really rebuilt their farm system. They traded guys like Chris Sale. They traded Adam Eden. They got a lot of prospects for them back. They even got the top prospect in all baseball, Yohan Moncada, who I think can be an opening day starter in the lineup. So this team really rebuilt their farm system. They're in full rebuild mode, and they got guys like Jose Abreu, Todd Frazier. They got guys that they can probably trade at the deadline. I don't see them trading Jose Abreu, but I can probably see them trading Todd Frazier, maybe David Robertson, the relief pitcher. But, this team looks, I think in a couple years, is going to be really good. This is probably going to be one of those years when they got to see what type of talent they have and how they can build around the talents. But I do see Yohan Moncada starting opening day.
Yeah, I think he'll be their opening day shortstop. He's a young guy. Get him some more playing time. He's obviously your future, so you might as well get him in there early and get him some more reps and get him ready for the prime of his career. Why even have him in the minor leagues? Just call him up now and get him a shot.
Yeah, I do think he will be the opening day star, but when I look at the rest of this lineup, there's really not a whole lot to get excited about except for outside of Jose Abreu and Todd Frazier. There's just really not. And, this is one of those rebuilding years that they're not going to win a whole lot of games, but they're going to find out what kind of talent they have and how they can rebuild with the top guys they have. I don't think Jose Abreu, I don't think he's going to be traded unless they get blown away by an offer. I do think they will trade Todd Frazier in the summer. I do think he's one of the top trade deadline candidates. And they're not done trading as well with their pitching rotation. I do think Jose Quintana, who's probably going to be their opening day starter, I think he's going to be traded at the deadline as well.
They're definitely going through a rebuilding regime that started with the Chris Hill trade, obviously. So they're trying to get younger, getting prospects, and kind of replicate what the Cubs have done. And now I guess you can say the Yankees as well. Kind of that next good young team who built through prospects. So they're trying to replicate that same success.
Yeah, and I don't see this team winning a lot of games. They still got James Shields, who is absolutely one of the worst pitchers in baseball last year. Carlos Rodon, I think he can be really good for the White Sox. They got Lucas Giolito, who I think could be in the rotation, and Reynaldo Lopez, who they also got in the Adam Eden trade with Giolito, could be in the 5th spot as well come probably in the summer. So this team's going to look a whole lot different in August than it is now. I do think so. All right, for the final team in the division that finished in last place, who had the worst record in baseball, is the Minnesota Twins. They finished only with 59 wins, but I do think they can be one of those teams that is going to be a whole lot better. I don't think they're going to be one of the worst teams again, but I don't think they're going to be one of the best teams at all. I think they're going to be in that middle of the tier pack. I think they're going to be around 70 wins. I think as high as 81. I don't see them getting 81 wins because of that rotation, but they got a lot of young guys there that are primed to have a breakout season. You got Byron Buxton, who was one of the top pitchers in baseball for a long time. You got Miguel Sano. And you got guys that pretty much are primed for a breakout year. I just think this rotation is not really a whole lot to get inspired about. They do got Jose Barrios, who was called up last summer, but he clearly showed that he wasn't ready for major league hitting. And they still got Brian Dozier, who they haven't traded, who I think they could trade him at the deadline. But when you look at this team, I do think there's a lot of breakout potential there. They got guys like Matt Kepler, who had a really good stretch last summer, Miguel Sano and Byron Buxton. So I do think those three core players are their future. So I do think it just depends on how this rotation performs. And it looks like Irvin Santana is going to be the opening day starter. But outside of that, there's really not a whole lot to get inspired about.
It's going to be interesting to see what the Twins do, because I feel like they're surprisingly going to be one of the more exciting teams in baseball, because I feel like they're going to score a lot of runs. Look at some of the guys they have. Brian Dozier, we saw what he did last year. Miguel Sano has some pop. Kenny Vargas at DH has some pop. Max Kepler, Byron Buxton. They're going to be a team that's going to hit a lot of home runs. So there might be winning some games like 7-5 because they literally can't pitch. I mean, you're looking at possibly a guy like Irvin Santana as your opening day starter. He's had some success, but he's not with the Angels anymore. He's way past his prime of his career now with Minnesota. So they're going to have to score a lot of runs, but that could be exciting. Could be a team that's going to hit a lot of balls out of the park.
Yeah, and that's why I think they can be a potential breakout team because of this lineup. I think they are going to be one of the most. I think they could be an exciting team. They're going to be a whole lot better than 59 wins. I think this team is going to be a whole lot better than that. I do think Byron Buxton and Miguel Sano kind of had those seasons where they're putting all their skills together, and I think Byron Buxton. I think this is the year he finally breaks out. If he doesn't break out this year, I don't know when he's ever going to do it. But I do think this is the year Byron Buxton breaks out. Max Kepler is definitely going to be huge in this lineup, not just this year, but in the future. And Miguel Sano, I think he's primed to be their power hitter for years to come. But I do think the major storyline with the Twins is Brian Dozier. Is he going to be with the team at the end of the year? The Twins are going to get a lot of trade offers for Dozier. He was in the trading block this offseason. And I do think he can be someone they can trade now because this team basically needs pitching. And I do think for them to get better at pitching in the future, I think they might have to trade Brian Dozier because I don't know if this team can be a playoff team. I don't think they're that talented. They are going to be fun to watch, but I don't think they're going to win a whole lot of games because of their rotation. So I do think Brian Dozier could be the guy to make this pitching rotation better in the future. I do think he can be traded at the deadline, even before that.
It's possible. I mean, we talked about him on the show here. He and Andrew McCutcheon about some of those guys who could get dealt before spring training. Didn't happen. I think the success of the Twins this season will determine where Dozier goes.
Yeah, and it remains to be. It'll be interesting to see where the Twins do with Brian Dozier. Later this summer. Well, we're going to take our last break here, and when we come back, we are going to discuss pretty much news around the league that happened this past week. We got Matt Wieters going to nationals. We got the intentional walk rule change. So we're going to discuss that when we come back to Going to Meet Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the Guns to Me Concepts Baseball Podcast. And we talked about the American League Central Division today. And, we discussed all the teams in the division and how we think they will perform throughout this year. But it's time to move on from that, and we got a little bit of some stories to tell you, or some news, I should say, from the past week. Matt Wieters, I think he was an All-Star last year, a former Baltimore Orioles catcher, goes to the Nationals on a 2-year deal that's worth $21 million. And I do think this is a huge addition to the Washington Nationals lineup. I do.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think he'll replace what Wilson Ramos had last year, but he's definitely an upgrade over Derek Norris, which is what they were looking at going into opening day with before signing Wieters. Plus, he has an opt-out after 1 year, which is only $10.5 million this year. So if it doesn't really work out, it only costs the Nationals 1 year. So I think it's a good move, a good bargain for a guy who's surprisingly still available in the free agent market.
Yeah, I do think he was one of the best free agents this season, but it was kind of a weak free agent class. Last season, Wieters was an all-star selection. He hit .243 with 17 home runs and 66 RBIs in 124 games. So that was a full year after coming off an ACL injury a couple years ago. So, I do think he has potential to be a really good hitter in this lineup. But, yeah, you're right. I don't think he's going to replicate what Wilson Ramos did. I do think Wilson Ramos is one of the best offensive catchers in baseball if he stays healthy. That's been the main problem. So I do think if Matt Wieters stays healthy and the Nationals do manage, the time, kind of like if they manage, his playing time really well, he can be a really good player for them. And because this is a team that has aspirations to make the World Series. They do have aspirations. Definitely.
I think they missed out a lot, though, this offseason because they lost a lot of pieces. They lost Mark Melancon to the Giants, and they couldn't really bring in anyone they aimed to do, one of them being Chris Sale. So they got a lot of room to improve on in my eyes. But it's a good signing, good start.
Yeah, and in other news, it looks like the intentional walk rule in Major League Baseball has been changed.
Yes, it has been improved, Jeremiah.
It looks like they have improved it. And instead of the intentional walk, when the pitcher throws 4 pitches to the catcher, outside the strike zone, they're going to use a signal in the dugout for intentional walk. And the reason why for this is because it takes literally a minute of dead time away from the game. So it's all part of how to make the game a little faster, how to change the pace. But, yeah, I'm not surprised. I think this was something that was going to get improved. And, I don't know, the intentional walk to me is kind of played out now. I do think this is something that Major League Baseball had to do. And I'm not surprised that it got approved at all. I'm not surprised at all.
No, we talked about it. We thought it would. The strike zone expansion did not get approved, which we both thought would not happen either. So it's a good thing. Imagine if this would have been in place when Barry Bonds was playing, because he seemed to get intentionally walked at least once every game. Now, not so much. I mean, on an average day, you'll see maybe 1 or 2 at the most per day in baseball, but it's a good step in the right direction. I think Rob Manfred's done a good job of eliminating dead time. You have the amount of time a coach or a manager can even go to the mound per inning. You have the clock in between innings to sort of warm up. So I guess they're doing a really good job, and this is another step in that direction.
Yeah, and I do think so as well. But that's going to conclude our show, Ben. I had fun today talking about the American League Central. I think next week we're going to talk about the National League West.
Yes, talk about the Giants, Dodgers, Rockies, Padres, and the I'm missing Diamondbacks. Oh, my.
Oh, my. All right. Well, we're going to have a lot more fun next week, too. And before we go, we got some spring training games happening this weekend too, and we'll probably talk about that as well. It actually starts today. Arizona will play Grand Canyon University. Then tomorrow we got Boston, Detroit, Philly playing as well. Friday we got major league teams playing against each other. So we got a lot of spring training action to recap next week as well. So we will have that for you along as a preview of the National League West. Well, I thank you guys for tuning in to Going to Meet Concepts Baseball Podcast. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
My name is Ben.
And you guys come back next week for our National League West preview.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.